It's time for
DodgerHeads. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Medium Large Sports Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined this morning by Matthew Moreno, here to discuss the Dodgers revealing their NLCS roster. And as we are starting the show, some breaking news on Twitter. Mike Shildt, no longer the manager of the Padres. Bob Nightingale reporting the parting was Shilt's decision. Quote, "It's time I take care of myself and exit on my terms." We will get to that in a moment because this is a Dodgers show, and we do have some Dodgers news, Matt, which is Ben Casparius on the NLCS roster, back from his 2-month-long exile, it feels like, from this Dodgers organization. Dalton Rushing is off officially 2-catcher season. Were you surprised with just one move, and this move in particular?
Yes and no. I'm seeing a lot of the familiar names here with us, about 12 hours ago. At this point, when we were doing our live show and kind of discussing, Anthony was on with us, and we were discussing potential roster changes. I think we ultimately landed on Casparius being a likely addition just from, the Brewers roster construction, their lineup, and the Dodgers. Dave Roberts already sort of telegraphing that they would add a pitcher. I think he said, at least one pitcher was the suggestion, and it turns out it was only one pitcher. So I'm not surprised that it's Casparius. I am surprised again. Like if you guys, I'm seeing a lot of people who were with us last night. Like I thought that they would add 2 relief pitchers, just given the state of the bullpen. That being said, I know we'll get into it. Like I think this is sort of indictment's probably a little bit of a too strong of a word, but it's an indicator of the state of like the organizational depth right now and kind of the level of performance and inconsistencies of some of the guys who we discussed last night that ultimately didn't get added.
Yeah, I'm with you. The only surprise to me is that there was just one move. It feels like these rosters always have surprises. The Dodgers are always cooking things up. And as we talked through it last night, I was just convinced that given how different the Phillies are to the team that they're about to play in the Brewers, that maybe there would be more. I suggested, is there a left-handed bat that they want to go get? That felt like a hole in the last series. Not only do they not add a left-handed bat, they take the only one that's sitting on the bench off of it in Dalton Rushing. And so I just said Ben Rortvedt is still there. So apologies to Ben Rortvedt. But they lose a left-handed bat. So to me, that was a little bit of a surprise. I saw we had a super chat from Cy saying, "Jeff, you talked me into needing another lefty bat after last night's show. Now I'm nervous we left off Rushing and don't have Conforto either." This was the only surprise to me, that it doesn't feel like with a righty on the mound, they have an option. Like if Pages continues to struggle, they don't have somebody that can go and take his spot, because I think Max Muncy's going to be playing more in this series than he did in the last series. And if that's the case, Rortvedt is the only lefty they have on the bench.
Yeah, I think what they're basically
the chat is reminding me Ha-Seong Kim is a lefty, so he's still on there. Good catch.
Yeah, I was gonna mention 2 things. One, I think they're looking at it as they trust their lineup, and they like if the Brewers don't have, they're not going to be pinch hitting a ton. And if the Brewers bring in a right-handed pitcher, the Dodgers have Max Muncy already in the lineup. They have their guys are set. I think, I know I forgot who was it, GI, who shared Conforto's stat. I mean, I guess we never fully verified that, but I would trust that maybe like it was factual, and it looked like Conforto hit well against Brewers pitching. So I'm a little surprised that he wasn't added on. Ricardo saying he's late. What did I miss, Ricardo? So we're discussing it now. Basically, Ben Casparius added onto the roster. Dalton Rushing was taken off, and we're just diving into, the decision to remove Rushing and not do additional changes. Ha-Seong Kim is a left-handed bat, so maybe they're looking at it as like they do trust him to get a pinch hit appearance, and it's not going to be the prototypical like, hey, we need a home run, here's our big lefty bat. It might be more in the light of Ha-Seong Kim can pull a single down the line, maybe hit one to the gap, get a double. If not, he's on base, he has speed to steal second base. I am surprised that they still stuck with the three, Alex Call, Justin Dean, Ha-Seong Kim, even though, as Anthony mentioned, like there's similarities and differences with the three of them. I don't know. Again, for me, I just worry a little bit about the pitching and the bullpen. And so if it needed to be Ha-Seong Kim, if it would have been one of Alex Call or Justin Dean coming off as well, like that, I could have understood, and I thought maybe would have made sense.
Yeah, 300 kind of echoing what you said to begin. I think they feel that a slumping Pages is better than Conforto and Rushing, and I agree with that assessment. And I think you made the key point. Oftentimes, we can get so obsessed with who is going to be the pinch hitter, but in order for somebody to pinch hit, you have to have them pinch hitting for somebody else. And that becomes the question of, like, other than Pages, is there a single person up and down this lineup that you could see them actually taking out of the game? Like, I don't see them pinch hitting for Kike Hernandez in any spot. I don't see them pinch hitting for Max Muncy in any spot. I don't see them pinch hitting for Tommy Edman in any spot. And so you go up and down this group, and it's like, well, who are they going to throw against righties? They're probably just going to keep the guys in. And I think, Matt, ultimately, this is a bet on Andy Pages. It's a bet that he's going to be better in the upcoming series than he was in the previous series. Not that he needs to go back to being an all-star level player like he was early on, but like competitive at bats, please, putting the ball in play. We don't need a 300 batting average, but like a 200 batting average would be nice from him. It does feel like this decision can either be interpreted as a bet on Pages, or I think the theme that you're bringing up is a bet against everybody else that was an option. It's a bet against Conforto, a bet against the bat of Dalton Rushing, and that kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit of both. And still, that being said, I probably would have kept Rushing on the roster to be the left-handed bat. Michael Conforto, I know, like he showed like flashes again, kind of here and there, and it just like I just have not seen enough consistency to trust him. And again, it's not like he ended up making the roster, and so it's sort of water under the bridge at this point. But yeah, I mean, I do think it's a little bit of everything. And to your point, Andy Pages, even during the regular season when he was struggling, like they still kept playing him. Like it's not like they went away from him. So I don't see reason for them to sort of do that now, even though obviously the stakes are certainly higher where, in the regular, not that games don't matter, because look, like the Dodgers could have had home field advantage had they won, a few more games, but that's not the case. So, but now like a loss, like literally could end your season. Like it puts you one step closer to your season being over. So there needs to be a little bit more urgency, but hey, Andy Pages is coming off just sending the Dodgers to the NLCS. So he's up and to the right, Jeff, as some would say.
Exactly. I was on the Blue Review this morning, and Parker was saying Pages had the big moment. And I said, Parker, good for you. You didn't say the big hit. It was a big moment, and he was involved in it. So kudos to him for putting the ball in play. The flip side of this is the catcher decision. The Dodgers obviously going down to two catchers, which, let's just state the obvious good news. That means they trust Will Smith's health a lot more than they did a week ago. They trust that he's going to be able to play. There aren't question marks anymore about his ability to play. Now, does that mean 7 games in 9 days? Potentially, remains to be seen, but I would imagine it's close to that, if not. So that brings up the second question, Matt, which is the decision to go with Ben Rortvedt over Dalton Rushing. We had a lot of conversations on this show asking the question, if Will Smith is starting every single game, is there an argument to be made that Dalton Rushing as the second catcher is more valuable, simply because what you will be asking of the second catcher is pinch hitting, more so than like pitch calling? That's less of a value in a second catcher. We all landed on thinking Ben Rortvedt would be the guy over Dalton Rushing. But now that it's reality, are you surprised at all that Rortvedt is the backup?
Not at this stage. I mean, I am surprised a little bit that we got to this point.
Yeah.
And I think, in fairness to Rushing, again, like and the season obviously isn't over. And so this, like, there's still, look, like he could get added onto their World Series roster if the Dodgers advance, and maybe he makes an impact there. But so I don't want to completely do like a full referendum on the year that he's had, but he was put in a difficult position, right? Like top prospect, a lot of expectations, playing every day in Oklahoma City, gets his first chance at the major leagues, and it's to sit behind Will Smith and start, once or twice a week. And we said it throughout the year, like that's a difficult spot for anybody to really be in. I think what this shows is, yes, to your point, Will Smith is healthy, so that's first and foremost. But second, like we just got done, like they're not going to pinch hit for him anyway.
Yeah.
And so I think if you're the Dodgers, like they looked at, okay, if, quote unquote, worst case scenario happens where he needs to come out of the game, maybe, his hand starts to swell up or soreness and he can't start a third day in a row. Uh, they trust. They look at it basically not trust. What this tells me is they value what Ben Rortvedt is going to bring defensively, game calling, even like I know you joked a little, not joking, but not joking last night about his ability to drop down a bunt. Like there's more value there, I think, in the Dodgers' eyes than what they're seeing from Dalton Rushing. And, some of that, again, Rushing is still a young player. He is growing, like the developing relationships with the pitching staff, the pitch calling, all that stuff. Like he is still learning and growing into that. Like that hasn't been a secret this season. And offensively, it's not like he came up and tore the cover off the ball, which again, not criticizing him fully for that because he was like, it's challenging to come up and it's difficult to come up from AAA to the majors and play every day and hit well. And it's even more difficult when you're not playing all the time. Then you layer in his shin contusion and injury and stuff like that. So little surprised that we got to this point with Rortvedt basically surpassing him on the depth chart, but not surprised that he was the choice.
I think that's a great summary. A month and a half ago, this would have been very surprising to me. But as we've seen the last 6 weeks play out, it's easy to understand how they came to this conclusion. And look, if the Dodgers have their way, Ben Rortvedt never sniffs the field at any point in this series because Will Smith will be perfectly healthy. They won't burn their second catcher for any reason, and things will move along. And so I think that piece of things makes a ton of sense. On the flip side, Ben Casparius is the pitcher, as you pointed out at the beginning. Dave Roberts had told us that there would be a pitcher add. The question was, would it be one pitcher? Would it be two pitchers? Would any of the existing pitchers be coming off of the roster? The answer is they kept it very simple. Rushing is out and Ben Casparius is in. I think I've picked him to be on every single roster up until this point, Matt, so I was glad to finally be right on this one. Robleski stays on for Tanner Scott, it's worth pointing out, and then Ben Casparius is in. The only surprise here is we had no idea what the Dodgers actually thought of him because he has pitched incredibly well this season. At one point, he was one of their best relievers. He seemed to have figured things out in the minor leagues. Finally, he gets his chance back with the big league club.
Yeah, Jeff, don't kick yourself too much. 1 for 3 still puts you in the Hall of Fame. So
that's what
you're
I tell myself every single day when I make my predictions, Matt.
You're on track. Yeah, I mean, I think Casparius was the natural choice again. Like, I don't want to completely belabor the point for people who were with us last night. The only reason I wasn't necessarily like fully sold 100% was just because, as you said, we haven't seen him, and I felt like there were opportunities. I was a little surprised he didn't necessarily make their wild card roster, just because he had finished the season. Like that was at least more. That was closer to when he was active pitching for Oklahoma City. Whereas now, he's gone a little bit longer without being in real games. He's thrown live BP for the Dodgers and stuff like that. So. But it makes sense. Like, you mentioned it. He was one of their best relievers at some point. He was their best relief pitcher at some point this season. And his versatility and value, led to the Dodgers sort of experimenting that when they needed starting pitching of moving him to the rotation, but sort of not moving him into the rotation. Like I felt like even how they handled that transition was weird. And then he was put back into the bullpen. And I think that sort of seemed to just throw everything off a little bit. But yeah, I mean, he's somebody obviously, when he's pitching right, when he's well, we saw it last October, he can certainly be a valuable contributor.
Yeah. And we talked about last night when we broke down kind of the way that this Brewers roster is set up. There is going to be a need for a guy who can get right-handed hitters out. We broke this down a little bit. There's two guys who struggle against left-handed pitchers, Contreras and Yelich. Both are dramatically worse against lefties than they are against righties. But there's a few guys who struggle against righties. Jackson Chourio is a guy. Blake Perkins. I said Bryce Perkins, who I think is a football player. I said Bryce last night. Blake Perkins, and then Joey Ortiz as well are all three guys that righties actually struggle against. And honestly, like Vaughn is way worse against right-handed pitching than he is against left-handed pitching. So you go up and down this group, and there's a number of guys where you could see a need for right-handed pitching. And so Casparius enters in, but he's going to enter into a spot. Like, I know he's the last guy added to this roster, Matt, but I have a pretty high level of confidence that we're going to see him in this group because Sasaki is your de facto closer. It still feels like Treinen is going to be a guy that they trust and leverage. And so once you get past those two, there aren't really right-handed options other than Emmett Sheehan, who I also think is a leverage guy. Like, I think Casparius is going to play a role in this like series, and maybe even more of a role than a guy like Justin Robleski or Clayton Kershaw or some of the guys who have already been on rosters.
Yeah, I agree. Depending on, obviously, we mentioned it last night, and the Dodgers are certainly counting on. There's no reason to not count on their starting pitchers to continue providing length, But in the event that something, does sort of happen, Casparius might be the first relief pitcher you see come into the game, depending on inning and situation, of course, just from the standpoint of Emmett Sheehan and Blake Treinen probably are a little bit higher up in terms of leverage spots right now. And so they'll want to save them. So yeah, it wouldn't be surprised that does, the sixth inning of, a 1-0 game, 2-1 game, like that still is an important inning type thing. And it could very well be Casparius needing to pitch that.
A couple people asking, obviously, people are high on Casparius. I don't think there's questions about his ability. There are some questions about if Casparius himself was the right choice. Will Klein is a guy that a lot of people wanted. Edgardo Enriquez was a name that we kicked around a little bit last night. I think we all ultimately landed on Casparius being on the roster. Were you surprised at all that if it was just going to be one, that it was Casparius and not Klein, not Enriquez, not kind of one of the other surprise names that could have been out there?
Not too much. I think they go with, some history type thing and experience. Look, like again, Ben Casparius, like he went through this last year with the Dodgers and was relied upon and delivered for them. And so I think that they haven't forgotten that. Yes, he hit a rough patch this season. The Dodgers have shown us time and time again with several players, that they will still stick with a player, even though, they'll look at the bigger picture and say, hey, like he was lights out for, 3 months for whatever it was. And yes, he hit a rough patch and then, he sort of got back on track type thing. So not fully surprised that it ended up being Casparius. Again, I do think that they probably would have stood to benefit from adding another right-hander, whether it had been Will Klein because of, recent, what you last saw from him before he was optioned down prior to the end of the regular season, or Edgardo Henriquez. I know it wasn't pretty against the Reds, to be fair. The Dodgers bullpen collectively, was outside of, Roki Sasaki, wasn't great anyway. Like Enriquez has shown, some of the similar flashes as Will Klein, where if he can get in the strike zone, he can dominate and do well. But yeah, so not surprised that it was Casparius ahead of those other two guys. Mainly, I think because of his experience.
Yeah, I was going to say 6 1/3 innings in the postseason last year, just one earned run. The walk rate and the strikeout rate were not where you want them to be. But I think the fact that he's been there, done that. And you mentioned, I think control is a key word. When the Dodgers are looking which right-handed pitcher they wanted to add to this roster against the team in the Brewers that is a contact-oriented team that does not chase, that walks a lot, and does not strike out. I don't want Edgardo Enriquez, who may not be able to find the strike zone on a given day. I don't want Will Klein, who may not be able to find the strike zone on a given day. I am looking for a right-hander that I believe can throw strikes. And I would include Robleski from the left side in this as well. Like both of those are guys who have proven they can fill up the strike zone, which is criteria number one as far as I'm concerned. So again, no surprise that Rushing is off. No surprise that Casparius is on. If there is any surprise to me, it's just that it's one move. That it felt like there were hints that maybe a different position player would also be coming off, that they might shuffle up the pitching. I know we had talked about, like, is Kershaw definitely safe on this group? Is Alex Call and Ha-Seong Kim definitely safe on this group? And the answer ultimately was yes, yes, and yes. They are all safe. And it's just the one move that the Dodgers end up making. So let's get to some super chats here. 300 says, if they don't have confidence in Rushing's hitting, you take Rortvedt's defense, bunting, and he did have some clutch hits down the stretch. We touched on this briefly. Like, do you think this is a referendum on Dalton Rushing and his ability to hit? Or do you think it's more like, does this have more to do with Rushing struggles or Rortvedt's successes?
I don't want to hedge. I think it's a little bit of both. I think if Dalton Rushing was, tearing the cover off the ball and the opportunities that he had, that they would have. I mean, look, they only made one pitching change, and I think if they felt that he, was a big enough threat with the bat off the bench, they probably would have kept him and picked from one of Call, Dean, and Kim type thing to make the pitching change. Like, it's not like they made, 2-3 changes and they needed, unfortunately, like Rushing just had to absolutely go. So I don't think it's, it's not, his career certainly isn't over type thing, but I think the moment right now that, yes, like they just looked at, as 300 is pointing out, like just the value that they're going to get from Rortvedt exceeds what they can count on from Rushing right now.
We had a question here from Jeff over on Facebook. Who would you have picked if you got one more arm in the bullpen? Again, we mentioned Enriquez as a possible name. Yep. Will Klein felt like the two that were batted around most on our show last night.
I'm torn between the two. Like, I don't know if I could choose between the two, because Will Klein, like he struggled at points when he was up earlier in the season, but then his most recent stretch when he got back into the strike zone, it was impressive. Edgardo Enriquez had generally, I thought, pitched relatively well during his opportunities, but then against the Reds, like it wasn't. And so, like, does that most recent result scare you the most? Type, like, if you go based off that, then it's Will Klein. If you go based off maybe a little bit more of a sample size, it might be Enriquez. I don't, Jeffrey, I'm sorry. Like, I don't have a set answer. I would have been honestly fine with either one of the two.
Yeah, I would have gone Klein personally, just because I was so terrified of the one outing that Enriquez had. And it kind of, his inability to throw strikes, we have seen before. His inability to miss bats, we have seen before. Klein at least potentially gives you the stuff. It's like both those guys have control issues, but I'll take my chances with the guy who might be able to miss bats as well. Jack with the super chat. Jack, if you meant to throw a question in here, just throw it in the chat and we will get to it. We appreciate the super chat. Vespine says, regarding Pages, but even Teoscar and Shohei, we're going to need patience in the batter's box. Peralta and company will not throw strikes unless they are forced to. And it's also worth pointing out, Peralta is the only guy who, in the starting rotation at least, who has swing and miss stuff. And so there's the ability to be a little bit more patient and a little bit more selective when you don't have to fear whether Quintana or Priester is going to be able to put you away necessarily. So my hope is that that breeds a little bit more patience, a little bit more composure from the Dodgers in the box. And I just keep coming back to, Matt, how terrible of a matchup the Phillies pitching was for the Dodgers lineup. That is what gives me optimism about this series. It's not that, like, I think everything's going to get better immediately. I just think the guys they had to face, all those lefties who are all incredibly good pitchers, was just worst case scenario. And so it's going to get better simply on the basis of a lesser opponent walking through the doors this time around.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is I think, not the Dodgers are probably going to take a little bit of a sigh of relief, and not from the standpoint of overlooking the Brewers, but just knowing that, they're not going to see three really challenging starting left-handed pitchers as soon as the game begins out there. And especially, we discussed last night, Ohtani obviously is the focal point, but Freeman and Muncy for that matter as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Not specific Dodgers news, but before we get out of here, let's just mention it real quick. If you missed the news right as we hopped on, Mike Shildt has retired as manager of the Padres. It was first reported as kind of a mutual decision. Shildt and the Padres have both since come out and basically said it was Shilt's decision to retire. A whole new managerial class coming to the NL West. I joked on Twitter, the grandpas are all gone. We get Melvin, grumpy grandpa number 1, left a couple of weeks ago from the Giants. Grumpy grandpa number 2, Mike Shildt down in San Diego, is now gone. I will let Dodger fans decide for themselves if he's just had enough of Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis, and everything that happens there. I think Anthony had, maybe he was sick of hand emoji down in San Diego. But how surprised are you by this news that Shildt is out as manager of the Padres?
Pretty surprised, because I thought it wasn't that long ago, maybe a week or so ago, it was reported that Shildt and Preller, I think, like, the plan was to move forward with both of them. So, like, that, considering that news did come out, like, this is, a bit of a shock. On the other hand, as you mentioned, like, San Diego, there are a lot of different things, a lot of dynamic at play, I think, down there. So not surprised from that standpoint. I guess what we'll have to see now is if Bob Melvin maybe makes his way back to San Diego, perhaps.
I love this from Gary. Shildt said, if I'm going to babysit, it's going to be my own grandkids. And then out there. So Padres, such a disappointment. He retired. Look, it's just chaos in San Diego is always a good thing for me. Hopefully AJ Preller gets a contract extension before he goes out and hires his next manager is the key there. So, all right. The news again this morning, Ben Casparius on the NLCS roster for the Dodgers, Dalton Rushing coming off. Dodgers are down to 2 catchers, but all of the other position players and pitchers who ended the NLDS will be on. Again, Robleski replaced Tanner Scott and then stayed on this roster. So nothing too surprising. Again, the only surprising thing to me is that there weren't any surprises in this announcement. Keep in mind, Scott Gierman will be live on this channel in just a little bit at noon. So 2.5 hours. DodgerHeads Unplugged with Scott Gierman will be here. If you are new to our channel, thank you for joining us. We are live all the time. Subscribe and ring the notification bell. We are live every morning, weekdays, with Scott on the Unplugged show. We will be live post-game tonight. Myself, Bruce Kuntz, and Blake Williams will be live for that one. We will be live again tomorrow night. And plug, Todd Rosiak, a beat reporter for the Brewers, has been on the beat for 15 years. Anthony and I got a chance to sit down with him yesterday. And that was a great sort of getting a preview from the Brewers side of things. Who are the key players that the Dodgers need to watch out for? Do they have enough pitching? And do they have a plan for Shohei Ohtani? That is on there. Also, me, Matt, and Anthony spent an hour and a half last night breaking down the series. So if you want a preview on who the Brewers are, what to expect, go ahead and check that out. We have got you covered on Game 1 game day, folks. You've got enough Dodgers content to get you from here until first pitch at 5:08.
We also
Matt,
made predictions on that
we
live
did
show.
make
Very
predictions.
important.
We did. Some of us made predictions. Some of us made multiple predictions. The one thing we didn't do, Matt, which this is maybe a good way to go out, is we did not make Game 1 predictions. Dodgers heavy favorites tonight. Blake Snell on the mound for the Dodgers. TBD on the mound for the Brewers. Expected to be an opener. I would guess lefty Ashby, maybe Koenig, maybe a new left-hander that they have added. I haven't paid attention if the Brewers roster has come out. There were reports that they might add. Here we go. It has come out. So it doesn't look like they added another lefty, I don't think, based on the names that we were given when we talked to their beat guy. So I would guess Ashby or Koenig. Probably Ashby is the opener, and then it could be Quintana, the lefty, or Priester, the righty, to follow. So with Blake Snell on the mound, what are you expecting for tonight? Give me a prediction, Matt.
I think the Dodgers win. In terms of a score, maybe like a 4-2 type thing. I don't know if it'll necessarily be high scoring.
I think the Dodgers are going to get some runs today. So give me 7 runs for the Dodgers offense and 3 runs for the Brewers. 7-3, Dodgers win. I think Snell pitches well. I think the bullpen gives us a slight scare. But ultimately, they close this thing out comfortably. So Iris says 7-2. Laura says 5-2. I've got 7-3. What would you say? 5-2?
Like 4-2.
4-2. 4-2. 300's got Dodgers 5-2. Iris says she's got 8.5 on the confidence level. So Gary says it's a must win when Snellzilla goes. And again, Dodgers heavy favorites. I think it was like -150, -160 last I saw. Dodgers on the money line tonight. So good news there. That is Matthew Moreno. I am Jeff Spiegel. Again, we appreciate you for joining us. Stay right here. There's tons of content right here on our channel. And again, Scott will be live at noon breaking it all down. And then I will be back with Bruce and with Blake tonight as soon as this one ends. So enjoy the rest of your day. Stay calm, everybody. I know it's game day. Don't let the nerves get to you. 5:08 is a long way away. So stay calm. Enjoy the rest of your day. Go Dodgers. And yes, still champs.